Hey everybody, Jory here, and today we will be continuing Exit Light's 31 Days of Halloween with some Skinwalker stories. Now, before we get to that, I just want to say that to all the new listeners out there, thank you for coming in and supporting this channel. I am Exit Light's son, and for all of the older listeners that have stuck around and continue to enjoy the content, thank you, and I am glad to be contributing more content to you guys once again. Now, these Skinwalker stories I have written myself, but one of them is an actual account that was told to me by a close friend of mine. I will let you try to figure out what story is the quote-unquote true story. We got to keep the investigation juices alive, as it will. And before we begin, let me also just throw in there, if you haven't already, throw in a like, throw in a share, and subscribe. Whatever you can contribute to growing this channel will be completely appreciated by not just me, but by the entire Exit Light family. Now, with that said, let us begin Skinwalker Stories. Hello, my name is Andy, and I thought I'd share my Skinwalker story with you today. One night, my brother and I were hanging out with our neighbor outside of our house. For context, we lived in a small town in the White Mountains of northern Arizona. We lived in a very small neighborhood surrounded by forest, and we weren't very far from where the fire in the sky incident took place. Anyways, the sun had just set, and we were sitting on my porch, just talking and hanging out, when my brother got really quiet and started staring off into the distance. I asked him what was wrong, and he whispered that we were being watched. He was staring in the direction of the road in front of my property, and when I turned to see what he was staring at, I could see a very tall being standing behind a bush. Now, this bush was close to the road in front of my house, and it was looking right at us. This figure was completely cloaked in darkness, except his eyes were glowing yellow, like they were catching the light from the porch and reflecting it back to us. Now, up in these parts, everybody knew each other, especially in this neighborhood. So it was extremely odd for someone to just be standing there and not say anything to us. We stared back at the figure for a moment before I finally called out to it and said, "Hey, is there something that we can help you with?" The man didn't answer, just stood and stared at us. My brother, not liking the situation at all and wanting to impress our friend, pulled out his big pocket knife and started walking towards the man. When he left the porch and had his big knife out, I went to pull him back because something didn't feel right to me. But as I went to reach for him, I saw something that I will never forget. The tall, dark figure got down on all fours and like a bolt of lightning shot across the street and back into the woods. I had to ask my friend and my brother if they had seen what I had just seen. And after confirming that they both saw it, we ran back inside very quickly, locked the doors, and stayed up all night, looking out the windows to see if we could see the creature again. We didn't go outside until morning at that point. Years later, while at work, I had told the story to a coworker while we were on a lunch break, and he told me that what I saw was a skinwalker. As a Native American, he was familiar with stories like mine and knew right away what it was. He said we were lucky to have spotted it and thus scaring it away, because it was more than likely looking to kill and eat one of us, which could very well have happened, as my neighbor was actually talking about going home when my brother spotted it. I have had weird stuff happen to me my whole life, but this story haunts me to this very day, as it's not just a weird story, but it is truly terrifying. Story 2. Hi, My name is Myron, and I am a Native American who lives on the Navajo Indian Reservation. I came across this thread, and I thought that maybe I should share my experience with everybody out there so that they don't feel like they are alone or crazy, because I have seen it and experienced it myself, and I know I am not crazy. Just as a reminder, skinwalkers are a part of my culture. It is a story that is handed down generation to generation. This is something that we as a tribe and as a people truly believe in. But up until a few nights ago, I never truly believed that skinwalkers actually existed. I thought they were more like boogeymen to try and get us kids to sleep. But after what I experienced, I know they're true. So the other night, I got off of work. I work at a local gas station on a highway that's about 20 minutes from where I live. Now, I don't live near any big cities, just a small little community on the Indian Reservation. I only have a couple of neighbors around me, and we're not that close to each other. So essentially, we do live out in the middle of nowhere, and we are somewhat isolated. Now, the drive home was uneventful, as it normally is, and as this was third shift, I was getting home just before the sun was coming up. I pulled up to my house, got out of my car, everything normal, everything silent with the exception of a small breeze in the air. I get up to my door and I hear a shuffling noise behind me. I turn around and see that there's nobody there. Now, of course, I live out in the desert, and there's going to be plenty of desert creatures around, such as coyotes, snakes, javelinas, and so on. So I thought nothing of it. I unlocked my door, went inside, turned all the lights on, went to the kitchen, made my dinner, sat down at my table, pulled out my phone, and just started scrolling the internet. Now, after a couple minutes of scrolling through the internet, I heard some tapping at my window. I didn't think anything of it. After all, it was slightly windy outside, and I do have a bush outside this window. Now, this is the window in my living room, across the house from where I was in my kitchen. And I didn't feel like getting up and walking all the way over to that window just to see that there was a bush tapping the window. So I thought nothing of it and went back to scrolling my phone. Another few minutes went by, and now a louder, more aggressive tapping can be heard at my window. This time I had to get up and check, as I know there's no bush making this kind of a noise against my window. Now, I do have neighbors, like I said, but we're not that close to each other. My nearest neighbor is about a mile away. So it would seem odd that they would just drive up to my house, which I would have heard, and started banging on my window when they know they can just knock on my door. I pull aside the screen, and I don't see anything outside. Odd. What could be banging on my window, especially this late at night? I turn around, go back to the kitchen, and just before I can sit down, I hear the tapping noise again, but this time it's at my kitchen window, much closer to where I was sitting. Instead of sitting down, I go over and check the kitchen window. Nothing. Okay, I thought, this is weird, but I'm not seeing anything. So I shrug it off, go back to the table, sit down, and I start to finish my meal. As I get back up to put my plate in the sink, I hear a knocking at the door. Now, this is my back door. Nobody should be knocking at my back door, no matter what time of day. And this was very aggressive knocking. At this point now, I'm starting to get scared. I keep a shotgun close by because, like I said, middle of nowhere, wild animals. I reach for my shotgun, make sure it's loaded, and I start towards my back door. Now I have a window that's next to the back door, so I can peek out of it and see what's going on. As I do, I see a dark shadow running across my backyard. Now this shadow was on all fours, but it was running extremely fast, faster than any animal I've ever seen. I open up the door, go out onto the back porch, and I just look around. And I don't see anything and I don't hear anything. After a few minutes, I go back inside, lock the door, and sit down at the table and just listen and wait to see what happens next. It didn't disappoint me, because only a few minutes later, I heard aggressive knocking at my front door, but this time as if it was trying to break into my house. I fell out of my chair, startled, dropping the shotgun on the floor. As I try to reach for the shotgun, it almost feels like the front door is going to collapse in when it stops. I shoot up, run over to the window, and I look out, and I see the tallest, biggest man I've ever seen in my life standing on my front porch, and it's already looking right at me. But this figure does not look right. It appears to be draped in some kind of skin, not its own skin, but like a deer hide. And the head is almost wolf-like, but the eyes are human. It was so hard to describe because at that moment, it jumped off the porch and ran back out into the desert. Now I'm not afraid to admit that I stood there shaking and quivering and somewhat crying for the next 5 to 10 minutes. At least, that's what I hope it was. I went back to the kitchen after I was able to calm myself down, grab my shotgun, go to my bedroom, close the door and lock it, leave all the lights on, and I stayed up the rest of the night with the shotgun pointed at the door, waiting for it to come get me. But it never did. The next day, I called my parents and told them what had happened, and they had told me that I had been visited by a skinwalker, and that it must have known that I was alone, otherwise it wouldn't have been so brave in its assault on my house. Fortunately for me, I had all my doors locked, and so it couldn't get in. I wanted everybody to know that I have seen it and I have experienced it. You are not alone. And they are out there. And all I ask is, please, keep your doors locked. Story 3. Hey guys, I've been reading these skinwalker stories on here, and I just gotta say that as truly terrifying as these stories are, I think I have a story for you that's going to top all of these. And I don't mean to say that in an egotistical way. I mean to say that in the sense that it wasn't just a skinwalker encounter for me. It was more than that. It was crazier than that. Let me begin by saying that I am an avid camper and hiker. I have done it all my life, starting with when my father would take me out. There's just something about nature that I just can't get enough of. Especially the isolation and the quiet. I just feel like I can be me, truly me, when I'm alone in the woods, surrounded by nothing but fresh air and trees. Now, of course, I've encountered my fair share of weird game, like bears, wolves, so on. But it's never been anything that I haven't been able to handle. I always keep myself well equipped, knowing that there are, of course, dangers in the woods, not just animals, but survival in general. So in this story, I was camping, as usual, by myself, in an area that I have camped in many times before. Sometimes you just like to go somewhere that you know and just hang out. And that's what I was doing. I was just hanging out, especially after the day I had. but that's a different story. Anyways, I had already set up my tent, already started my fire. I had already went out and caught some rabbit, and I was cooking it. Now, I would say the time of night was probably 11, maybe 11:30, getting close to midnight. And I would plan on eating this rabbit, reading a quick book, and going to sleep. I'm more of a night owl than anything else, so I didn't plan on going to sleep until 3 o'clock anyways. As I'm sitting there cooking this rabbit, I've been hearing noises around me. Now, of course, this is the woods. I expect to hear noises around me. I was not afraid. I always carry a handgun and a rifle and a knife with me at all times. But as I was starting to pull the rabbit off and eat it, there was a noise that I heard that caught me off guard. It was the howling of a wolf, but the howl was wrong. Something was off to it. It was almost as if something was trying to mimic the sound of a wolf. But as I have been in the woods my whole life, I know what a wolf sounds like. And this was not a wolf. This was something pretending to be a wolf. I had my handgun at my side just in case. And I kept scanning the area as I was eating my rabbit. And in the direction that I heard the fake wolf sound, I could hear something coming towards me. Now, it was trying to be silent, but it was big. And it was making too much noise for my trained ears. Now, I tried to pretend that I didn't know it was coming towards me and that I was simply eating this delicious rabbit. But I kept my attention in that general area. And I'm glad I did. Because emerging from the woods was a figure. Now, humans don't normally trespass up here. Only the most avid of hikers and campers will come up here. And generally, I have never seen anyone come this far into the woods as I have come. So to see the figure of a man start to emerge from the woods was very startling. But what was more startling was the stench that hit me right away. It was the stench of rotting meat, of something so disgusting. I almost gagged on my rabbit. And as I continued to look in the general direction of the figure, I could tell also that there was something wrong with its body. It looked as if its arms weren't really arms, but more like animal appendages. I don't know how to explain it. Its legs were bent backwards, and it looked like it had a hard time walking in general. But what was truly terrifying was when the fire caught its face. It did not look human at all. There was something animal-like about its features, but also not. It's hard to describe. I've been in the woods for so long, I just can't tell you what it was like. It was one of the weirdest abominations I've ever seen in my life. But I did know one thing. It was coming at me, and it seemed to mean harm. Like I said, I keep my weapons with me at all times, and at this point I could not ignore the fact that it was coming at me. I drew my handgun at it quickly, and I shouted for it to stop, but it did not stop. It did not seem to care. It just kept coming at me. And its pace quickened. And as the pace quickened, its formations changed. It almost became more animal-like and quicker. I panicked, and I pulled the trigger, and I shot at it. But I missed. And you would think that the sound of the gun going off would maybe perhaps startle it or scare it, but nothing. Nothing. This creature just kept coming at me as if I had done nothing. In a panic, I went to reach for my rifle, but I knew that it was going to be too late by the time it reached me, and I was going to be a goner. But this is where the even weirder part of this story takes place. something big smacked the side of this animal in the head hard and sent it flying across my camp. When I had the guts to look up, it was a giant rock, and it was sitting in the middle of my camp. I looked over at the creature that had been running at me, and it was dazed, but it was starting to stand back up again, as if it was only a brief moment of being hurt. I looked in the general direction of where the rock might have come from, and from the forest, I saw it. It was a Bigfoot, a huge ape-like creature coming out of the forest, and it had another giant rock in its hand, and it threw it at the creature again. This time it hit the creature so hard in the head that it flew back and hit a tree and slumped to the ground. Instead of paying me any mind at all, the Bigfoot ran across my camp, picked up the creature, and ran off into the woods, disappearing just as quickly as it had appeared. Now, as I've said, I have camped in these woods my entire life, and at that point, I thought I had seen everything. At that moment, I was so scared. I had no idea what to do. I was deep in the woods in the middle of the night. I didn't know if I could make it back to my vehicle, but I had to give it a chance. I packed only what was needed, and I left. I left my camp gear. I left my tent. I left as much as I could behind. And I ran. I ran as hard and as fast as I had never ran before. I needed to get out of there. I didn't know what to do. How do you tell anybody that you saw not just some abomination creature, which, as I later found out, people call a skinwalker, but Bigfoot, an actual Sasquatch, all at the same time? And it saved my life. I don't know how long it took. I wasn't paying attention, but I made it back to my vehicle and I sped out of there as fast as I could. And I've never gone back. And to this day, I will never camp again unless I have people with me. That day changed my life forever. I don't know what to think about it. I don't expect people to believe me. I don't even believe myself sometimes. But I can honestly say that I was saved from being killed by a skinwalker from Bigfoot. That's all I got for you today, guys. I hope you enjoyed these skinwalker stories, and I hope you continue to enjoy the rest of the 31 days of Halloween presented by Exit Light. Once again, whatever you can do to support this channel would be completely appreciated. Thank you, good night, and happy Halloween.